Hello, you are now entering the infinite void. Hang on tight. We cannot save you now.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. I'm your co-host Jacob.
And I'm your co-host Matty, and this week's episode is part 4, Morals on Ethics, part of our artificial intelligence series. So yeah, I can't believe we've already done 4 episodes now, but hopefully today's
Yes,
going to be a good one.
yes, it's a little bit crazy. I was thinking about this yesterday, both bits about this, because like we're now into like the 20s of episodes, which is always pretty cool, and it's just crazy how quick everything's gone. Even like with this 5-part series, like it feels like we've already just started it and we're already on episode 4, so it's pretty cool. But it's definitely nice to work through because I don't know about you, we've wanted to talk about so many like aspects of this for so long, and we just keep referencing it. So it's good that we're finally like breaking all the bits down.
Yeah, we've definitely touched on it. I know I've said about like our phones being conscious creatures and stuff in the past, so it's going to be a good one, I think, and covers a lot of what we've talked about in previous episodes.
Yeah, definitely. And just for anybody watching, if for any moment I look like I'm going to cough or anything like that, or I have tissues or anything, it's just because I think I've got a cold. But we will cruise through this like we always do. But yeah, what's kind of your like understanding of this? Because this was all quite new to me. I was more so under the impression of like morals and ethics from kind of like as silly as it sounds, probably like an iRobot movie standpoint of like what is the robot going to decide, who does it benefit, and all this kind of stuff. But it's interesting because from my like research this week, there's definitely the whole other side to it too, with like how we should treat the robots.
Yeah, I think there's like 3 sort of cases in this, and the first is the quite obvious one of like how do we allow AI and robots to affect us? So
Yeah,
if they're driving us around, if they're doing all this stuff for us, how do we let them do that?
yeah,
And what do we allow them to do? And then there's a second case, which is like the reverse side of that. Is like how do we treat the AI and what do we think of it as, and how do we sort of morally use it? And then I guess there's this sort of third case, which is like how we actually interface with them and sort of the relationships and um, interactions that we have with them and sort of their place in society. So that's sort of how I view it. And I think from what we sort of discussed before we came on air, we've got a few sort of examples in each of those. So hopefully we'll cover quite a wide range of ethics.
yeah. No. I'd agree with you. I find it really interesting because it is like you were saying. If we do have like more breakthroughs and stuff with consciousness, and we start to learn like what is conscious and what isn't and stuff like that, and some of these kind of like ideas come into play, it could totally change the way you treat your smartphone and stuff like that. So
Oh yeah, definitely.
it's cool.
Yeah. So shall we start with the one you mentioned about how we allow robots to affect us and what role they play and what they do, kind of thing? Shall we start with that one?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good one. I think that's pretty much like the main one too in most films and stuff as well, isn't it? Just like this idea of how are we going to integrate them into our society?
Yeah. There's always the sort of I think even if it's not AI, there's always the sort of stigma of like new technology and what it can do and how it will change things. People are usually quite averse to change like that. But yeah, I think the AI one is particularly interesting because they are much more like us and they can obviously do much more. And when we said in I think it was episode 1 now, AI sort of opens up a lot of areas where it's potentially quite sensitive and or even dangerous, and even things like self-driving cars. You know, there's a real sort of human life danger here. So like how we actually allow them to go about doing their thing, and part of it is the safety and the ethics and morals of like what do we allow them to do, but there is the sort of other side of it which is we want them to do things efficiently, and they can deliver cost savings, and they can deliver sort of more product or something like that. So it's this trade-off of like letting the AIs overrun everything and just transform everything into a very efficient utopia, with like the human side of it of like what do we actually value, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, because like even with just like, for like instance, iRobot, just that whole idea of you having like an autonomous car, and if it gets into like an accident or an incident where it has to collide with someone, and it's taking on like the data just as like what's got the best probability, say, or something like that, and you've got somebody old and somebody young, the likelihood of the old person being hit is probably like a lot more. Not that any of these car companies are like coding into their cars that they want you to like take out old people or anything, but that's like probably more likely from like a survival standpoint of like which one is going to be like the more chance of survival.
Yeah.
But then your other argument on that too would be, well, there wouldn't be any car crashes or any problems if all cars are autonomous, so that's not going to happen in the first place. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think particularly the car, because the car one is always like put forward in like university ethics courses of like, should you hit the 3 criminals and should you hit the one sort of doctor sort of thing. There's always these like things that come up, and the AI I think is a sort of chance to explore that. But I think this is an area, and we'll probably discuss it with other areas where there needs to be some sort of almost like a government body set up to actually deal with this stuff, because imagine a car company, that they ultimately someone will have to code into a car like how it reacts in certain situations.
Yeah.
And if it's making some sort of analysis of, you're driving along in your car and something happens, a tire blows out, and you can either go off the road and hit a tree and the driver of the car will almost certainly die.
Yeah.
Or, to sort of try and stay on the road, but potentially, lots of other cars sort of get involved in a collision. From an AI perspective, there's a very obvious answer of what it should do.
Yeah.
But no one would ever buy a car that is coded up to deliberately kill the driver. Like, they just wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. I agree with you on that one. Like, you just wouldn't. And this is kind of like the issue, because like I think, without sounding like one of those people too, it's definitely like doable, but I think not in a world that's like so based on like profits stuff. I think, do you know what I mean? I think in a more ethical world where we might value like the said people over like the said product, do you know what I mean? But it's difficult, because you would want these systems to come in and make everything like much more proficient and to like run better and be more durable and everything. And then that does obviously have a cost too, because then, as you were saying, like that code would take the situation that's probably like the least amount to cause any more problems to anybody else. Do you know what I mean? But then it is deciding like a human life. So
yeah, I think all of this stuff is quite sort of sensitive, and I think very often it's a case of the person buying the thing probably has different motives to wider society. What if I buy something, what I want that thing to do, you could create a machine, I buy an artificial intelligence, or I rent it from someone that's able to do something incredible. What I might want it to do could be at complete odds with the rest of society. So, but ultimately, if I'm the one paying for it, then shouldn't I be the one that gets to decide what it does? Sort of thing?
Yeah. No, it's weird as well, because like I think this is like such a difficult thing to kind of like get around. Is like with like humans, there's like this aspect of we can kind of like divide us all up into individuals. So like if something goes wrong, or somebody acts out, or somebody breaks, or anything like that, you can kind of just take this approach that it's like, that's just one of the many. Like most of us are good, so like, you know what I mean? We'll just carry on like chugging along. And I think with like AI, it's kind of like just one mind in charge of everything instead of many minds in charge of everything. So like if it goes wrong or anything with these kind of things, or these kind of decisions gets made, and that's on like a huge scale, then
Mm-hmm.
it could look like it's not serving humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the fundamental problem here is that a lot of these things AI could do very, very well are very human things. Where I said, I think in the last episode, that lot of decisions that we make as humans aren't the best decision on
Yeah,
paper. But we do them because they feel right, or because we have a sort of sense that we should do them.
yeah,
And one interesting one was, it, sort of a while back, we discussed like YouTube algorithms and like how sort of social media. It was in our social media episode, like how social media algorithms should
yeah,
work, and that's a very obvious case where the desires of the companies that are making the social media algorithms are obviously very different to what is good for society as a whole. You
yeah.
know, they want to make money by sort of doing something. And actually, a case that I came across and I heard about was car insurance. And stick with me, but it will get more interesting.
Yeah.
What it was it was I can't remember the insurance company, but it was in America, and somebody sifted through all the data and stuff, and they found that people with Hotmail addresses were being given higher insurance premiums. Like, obviously, the insurance company, you ask for all these details, you put in all your details onto the thing, and then like an algorithm somewhere will say, "Oh, this person we think we can insure for $300 a year or something."
Yeah.
Like, obviously, there's an algorithm that does that, and the algorithm was taking Hotmail addresses and charging people more. Now, this is where it gets, I think, really interesting, and is where like there's this breakdown of what we think should be right and what is actually right. Because immediately you think, and in the case of Hotmail addresses, it's a bit sort of innocuous, but it could be race, it could be gender, it
Yeah.
could be age. You know, when you start saying, oh, people of a certain race are being charged more, that's a lot more then contentious than an email address. But somewhere in the data, this insurance company has data on millions of drivers. There is obviously something which is saying people with Hotmail addresses cost us more. Like,
Yeah.
maybe people with Hotmail addresses are, older, or they are, whatever it is.
Yeah.
They have the data, and the algorithm is using the data, but it doesn't feel right. But what do you do to them? You say, oh yeah, we know that Hotmail address users cost you more, but you can't do that. You can't
Yeah.
you can't use that information. And in the case of like Hotmail addresses and insurance, it's obviously a bit sort of stupid and stuff. But once you start to get into contentious issues, or you have AI making decisions that are more important than car insurance costs, you get all these really difficult questions that are hard to answer about, do we let the AI just do its thing and get the right answer, or do we put controls in place to do what we think is like socially right? So
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, and it's like what you're saying too. Even on like the macro level, we could have an AI in place that we think is doing the right thing, and it might take us 30 years to realize that actually it was just doing this one thing slightly off than what it was supposed to be, but we just haven't noticed over time, and now there's like a big problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And particularly when you get into things like we discussed about like health and those sorts of aspects of life, you potentially have an algorithm somewhere making an actual decision about who gets to live and who doesn't, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it could just be, oh, you make an algorithm that sorts through all the patient data and gives them appointments depending on how urgent they are.
Yeah.
If you code it up wrong, or it makes some decision that you just don't think about, it could shunt all people with some sort of disease just to the back of the queue because, oh, they're goners anyway, kind of thing. And again, it might be the right answer, but obviously you can't do that. So.
Yeah. It's kind of scary, really, when you think about it, because it could get out of hand really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think that's why that's why the case of AI, how do we let it interact with us, is probably the most important one, and like you said, the one that gets all the like media attention and is in films and stuff, because it can be such a massive issue, and it's very easy to see how it could be such a massive issue. So
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. It's weird because you don't really ever think about it. Do you know what I mean? Like when people are talking about artificial intelligence, it still feels like the main hype, well, the main buzz like around the conversation is like how we're gonna do it, not like what have we got in place for if we do it, or like what have we got ready to go if this becomes a thing. Because like we can flip the conversation we've just had on its head and go the other way with like what are we gonna now like teach the public on how to treat these like artificial intelligences, and are they going to be different ones doing different jobs? And you could very quickly go, because humans just love like groups. It's just something that we love. Even if you're like the world's most open-minded human being, you're still going to love a certain kind of music, or like a certain kind of art, or a certain kind of colorway, or whatever it is that you're interested in. You're still going to have like your little thing. And like you could quite quickly see like humans just becoming a little bit silly and creating like drama and having like classes to the robots, be like, oh, you don't respect the bin robots, but you respect the autonomous driver in your car because that gets you from A to B and stuff like that. And it's interesting because this was something that I learned from doing my little bit of research this week, but just this whole idea of like robot rights. Like what we're gonna, I think the cool term is roboethics, I think is what the internet said. But just this idea of like how we're gonna like design them first and construct them, because if they're like have a sense of being or consciousness, they're gonna like be aware if we've built them well or not to carry out their job. Like if they know we've built them to only last 10 years, there's nothing they can do in that time and stuff like that. And then like how we're going to treat them, how they're going to treat each other. Like, will they see each other as competition, or will they see each other as like, hey, let's all get together? Do you know what I mean? And it's quite interesting because that you could have the exact same conversation that we've just had about like how we're going to integrate them into society, but it's like how we're actually going to treat them as well.
Yeah, I think the really interesting case is when you get to sort of conscious AIs, and we discussed in episode 3. Like, I think that would be like a real tipping point. Even if your toaster had an AI in it that wasn't conscious, if it was a really intelligent toaster, I don't think people would have a problem with like just chucking it in the bin, like because I think people would just naturally view it as a very smart computer in a toaster kind of thing.
Yeah.
But once you get to sort of conscious AIs and things that are very good at mimicking human behavior and can sort of display emotions, and particularly if they can talk, I think that's a big one. You have very difficult questions about what you can do to these things, and do we treat them as humans? Because in some ways they're more intelligent than us. They can do everything non-physical that we can. Maybe we should treat them as humans. Should we treat them like farm animals and give them similar rights to cows and sheep and stuff, like, or do we just treat them like a computer and we can do with them what we want?
It will be interesting actually, because I wonder if this is like super hypothetical now, but like if they're conscious, then I know we're probably going to do an episode on like free will in the future, but you're arguing that it is having an ability to like make its own choices. You could totally see like a way where it like plays out where these AIs, as I say, like if these robots like come in to like pick up like rubbish or something like that, like one of them's just having a crisis. And like you just go out to like give it the bag and it's like, what am I doing here? Like what's my meaning? And you're like, oh yeah, just have my rubbish. And then it just goes on a mad one and like runs down the street, like starts smashing people's cars and stuff. And like, I wonder because like I did a bit of research here, and I've got this bit about like the whole idea of like threat to human dignity, and it's this argument on like there are certain positions that like robots should never replace and stuff like that. But if they're conscious, then would you have like AI judges to like have trials for AIs that maybe hadn't done what they were coded to do, and they'd actively or consciously acted against their instructions? Because like a human wouldn't be able to like have that, be able to like make that decision because they wouldn't understand. Do you know what I mean? Because like, but then like an AI judge, because like you're saying, like if we stick a load of AIs in like dead end jobs, and they could do so much more than they can, like, and then one of them just does something and causes a huge problem to the economy or something like that, and then they're like, would they be prosecuted because they are like a conscious being, or would we just switch them off?
But yeah, I think again the consciousness thing's important. Like in the news, I think this week there was a case of there's these cases are starting to happen where like self-driving cars do something, and people try to sue the self-driving car.
Yeah.
Because someone's driving along in a car, and it's meant to be, because at the moment you still have to be, you're the one legally driving it, but then something happens, maybe you black out and the car carries on. Well, at that point, who is responsible? If someone's blacked out behind the wheel, they are. I mean, you could obviously say that maybe they've been negligent or something. I don't know, but it seems very unfair to blame them for that. The self-driving car, is it let's say Tesla. Is it Tesla? Are they the ones at fault? Is it specifically the person who coded the little bit of code that deals with detecting someone's at the wheel, sort of thing? Is it their fault? And I said I saw this week something like this. Someone had died in a self-driving car because I think it got confused on this very weird bit of road, and it thought like the road split, and it basically went into the reservation where the split was, because it was a new road layout or something like that. And the family said the driver died, I think, and the family were trying to say, well, your car is meant to be able to get people safely between places, and it's killed someone on the way, sort of thing. Whose fault is that? On one hand, that person at the wheel should have been driving, and if it wasn't a self-driving car, very obviously it would be their problem. Whereas on the other side, does that car have a legal responsibility to prevent accidents? And I think in the case of something that isn't conscious, I would still fall on the side of, if you're driving, it's your responsibility, sort of thing. But then if your car or whatever it is conscious, or is a very, very good AI, who is legally responsible for it? And again, I think people probably need to have a think about this before people start driving around in self-driving cars all the time.
Exactly. Like, especially if it is conscious and you have like 5 or 10 years of there being no problems, and then it like actively makes that decision 1 or 2 times somewhere.
I think so. This is a problem with the AI, is that, and particularly if it was conscious, was that it is very often just a black box of stuff. It would be incredibly difficult to prove. And in some ways, human legal systems are flawed on this point. It's very difficult to prove whether someone did something intentionally. Whether you deliberately killed someone, or your self-driving car deliberately drove off the road, or whether it was just a mistake or an accident, or they're not at fault. We struggle to prove that in humans, and we don't really, do we? We just get a group of people together and they make a decision. It's very difficult to prove that. And in the case of a conscious AI, could you prove that? I mean, you'd probably have to get some of the world's finest computer science experts around a table to look through the code and try and decide what it was doing. And look at the sort of black box, and decide what the machine had done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it will inevitably, as these things become more common and become more complex, there will, I think probably in the next decade there will be some like landmark legal case which sets the precedent for it. A
Yeah.
company will create an AI that does something to someone, and a precedent will be set on whether it's legal or not. I think.
Oh man, I hope that that's not me. And what a scary thought if it is. Just in the future, if anyone's ever able to go back and see me say, I hope that's not me. I don't want to be the person that sets that.
Mm-hmm.
But it totally would be me, because I'd definitely go and try whatever it was, because I'd be well open to it. But no, that's interesting. It's a weird one, because like it stretches so far, and I don't think people really ever think that. Like, it's not just like autonomous cars. Like, it's pretty much most of like just the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, most jobs could be replaced, and it's not like a few of them. Like, I know, like the talk always first is like delivery drivers, and then like factory roles and stuff like that. But like, it's everything. Do you know what I mean? It's marketing, lawyering, like banking,
Yeah.
even
But
like design and stuff. It can be done with all
But
that.
this is the thing. In some ways, like it's not really a technical logical issue now. The things like the delivery drivers and let's just say delivery drivers. There's a very clear technical barrier of could you create something? Could you create a lorry that's able to drive itself around and like correctly sort of hand over food to you sort of at your door? That's obviously quite a difficult thing to do, to create a robot that can do that.
Yeah.
The physical engineering involved in that is quite difficult. In some of the cases, and let's just say judges in particular, a judge is someone that sits there, sifts through information, and gives out a verdict.
Yeah.
In some ways, these professional sort of jobs that we think are long sort of a way for AI to conquer are some of the easier ones. I have no doubt that if someone wanted to, they could create an artificial intelligence, stick 30 years of case law into it, type in a few sort of bits of evidence and things, and out would pop an answer. I have no doubt that we could do that now.
No, yeah, I totally agree with you, and it's with loads of jobs as well. Like,
Yeah.
even like creative jobs, you could have like teacher roles, like all that kind of stuff. It can be done that way pretty much now, and it's like not even at really a level of like proper artificial like intelligence. So I completely agree with you. I think what will be interesting is the ones that like kind of like build chatter around, like, are we going to allow judges for human cases to be AI? Will we allow like police officers or like the police to be AI, or nurses or therapists? Because like we already have like customer services already, like with like the phone based ones, which are always really annoying. Not that they are getting loads better. I remember when I was a kid, they like proper sucked, but now sometimes you have to like really like wait a second to see if they're real or not. But like,
particularly the chatbots. Like, I'm convinced I've had like conversations with chatbots that are just artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
I've never known. Like,
yeah, no, totally. But it will be interesting to see, because with like the case of like nursemaids and therapists and stuff, they're obviously going to be dealing with different kinds of people, which means there's going to be like some serious multi-layering kind of like what's okay and what isn't, because ethics with, say, for instance, like an older person or somebody that was like mentally ill, there might be a said way to go about something, and all the AIs are like given that in code, but for this specific human being, you might have to act differently around them, kind of thing. And I think it'll just be really interesting, because it'll be a test to see like how far we can push it with what our capabilities are, but then also kind of like a human trust element, which I think will be really interesting, because if you look at human history, that is probably the one thing that never stops, is our inability to trust other people. Like everything that seems to have happened throughout human history is somebody not trusting somebody else. So like something so huge as this, that's going to literally change the world. Like it will change the world in all aspects. It will just be interesting to see how much humanity trusts it, because it's one thing making it, but then the two other outcomes is either humanity welcomes it with open arms, or somebody accidentally lets it out because they weren't like doing it properly.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's either accept it or don't.
Yeah, I think personally, I think it'd be a gradual thing. You know, a lot of technologies, you have this sort of like creep of technology into stuff. It's very few technologies over the last sort of 100 years have like popped up and just happened. You know, the only one that will come close to that, I would say, is like the smartphone, where it went from, you know, from the iPhone being made to a lot of people having a smartphone was like 2 years.
Yeah.
That's really, off the top of my head, like the only technology in the last 50 or 100, no, let's say 50 years that has like just happened overnight. You know, the internet, started in the 90s. A lot of people in the early noughties still didn't have the internet. So
yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I think probably prior to the smartphone, it was probably the radio or the television, like one of those. But yeah, no, I'd agree with you. And like, but even that rollout was insane. And I think this rollout will be much faster than anybody is like giving it credit. I don't think it's going to be like a slow burner for the next 50 years. I think it's probably going to be quite impactful in like the next decade for sure.
Yeah, but I think it won't all happen at once. It will come in like big chunks. And already, I would say people are pretty comfortable with the idea of, delivery drivers and, okay, maybe not drivers, but, customer services and supermarkets and things using artificial intelligence. And it seems like we're right on the cusp now of like self-driving cars with AI sort of becoming accepted. And I think it will be a case of like, oh, they're accepted, and that there's like a 6-month period where they're like trialed, and then like they just happen.
Yeah.
And then like further down the line, there'll be like, it will come in these like chunks of very, very rapid like steps.
Yeah, I think it'll just be like industries. It'll just be like sectors in industries that just get taken over every couple of years. There'll just be like a new one that has it.
Yeah, and it will be within industries and sectors will be very rapid because the benefits are so massive. They are huge. It's conceivable that with like customer service and stuff, a company, let's say a telecoms company, they could employ 1,000 people to like man call centers and take calls from customers. That could be done 95% of the time by bots and artificial intelligence. Well, that's a lot of people you're saving wages on. So I think it will be very rapid within sectors, but inevitably, some sectors will take longer than others to get to that point where change happens.
It's a little bit off topic, but do you think when this kind of stuff happens, like universal basic income is probably a good way to go?
I think it will have to. I think I can't remember what episode it was now, but I thought sort of ended it with saying like one of the biggest things of this is that we will have to adapt to a world where either unemployment is like at 50% or people just work like 2 days a week. We will have to do that because there simply will not be jobs for people to do. It's not going to happen. People, I think it's almost maybe it's naive, maybe it's a bit sort of dishonest of like the people creating AIs and stuff to be like, oh, but people working in supermarkets, you're going to lose your job as supermarket employees, but we're going to hire loads of people like making AIs and like maintaining the robots and stuff and all this sort of thing. Well, Obviously those jobs are going to come along, and more people will work in that. But the whole point of a supermarket taking on this stuff is to reduce the amount of staff they're hiring. Like that's ultimately it. It's a cost saving. So, if every job in the world is sort of cut in half, either they fire half the people, or they say, oh, we don't need you full time, you just work part time because we've got an AI to do the other part of your job. We will have to adapt to people not working.
Yeah. It's weird because a lot of people can get freaked out by this as well. Like I think we did mention this in one of the episodes. Like I had people when lockdown was beginning last year that were terrified to just be off, to be either furloughed or to just be off. And I was like, what? So you have all this free time to like focus on things, but some people just really don't want that. They like having their job. That's what gives them purpose. And that's kind of that. And it's going to be a huge shift because it's such a different way of living. And it's funny because like you'd think right at the start when everybody's like really, really working and all conditions suck, everyone's like, what's the goal? And it's like, so we don't have to do this. And like, we're getting to a point where it's like that. And we can kind of just like unload everything we don't want to do. And I think it's probably classic humans. Just, it's going to be met with a fight back because there's going to be a large majority of people that are like, no, this is my purpose. This is what I want to do. I don't want to have universal basic income. I don't want robots doing everything. And it's going to be stressful.
Yeah, I think what will change it will, I think there's going to be a real difficult period where this stuff is happening, because not to get all sort of socialist on it or anything, but what will inevitably happen will be poorer people will lose their jobs first. People working in sort of menial jobs, those jobs will go and they will be unemployed. And during that time, unemployment will soar, and the rich will be like, oh, just sort of stuck in their own ways. Oh, I'll just get a job and work harder, sort of thing. When the reality is there aren't the jobs, and it won't be until the second stage and the sort of later stages where it is the professional sort of services, the lawyers, the bankers, the things, when those jobs start to go and people sort of start to wake up to the fact like, oh, this is changing and we are going to have to do something about it. But yeah, I think, you take it to the extreme of some sort of utopia. If the AI and robots are doing literally everything, then, A, we don't have to work because everything is done, but like B, what is the point of an economy and what is the point of money anymore? Do we even need universal basic income, or do we just live in a world where AI creates anything, you can just order everything you need anytime, whenever you want it? Like,
yeah.
So,
no, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. I think I'd agree with you on that, because it's going to be just so surreal when all this kind of stuff starts happening. It's weird because like it just doesn't sound real, but we're like very close to it.
Yeah,
and it's not even like a doomsday kind of thing, because I don't think it will be bad, but I think at the beginning it will be bad because we're just not going to deal with it correctly.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's already happening. Like this year, so many millions of people will lose their jobs to artificial intelligence. Like that will happen.
Yeah.
And like nothing will really change in society. It would just mean that those people are unemployed.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And I think rather than just waiting until it starts to affect sort of corporate bigwigs, we should actually maybe start doing something about it now.
Yeah, no, totally. And like even like with this pandemic, like you can see where things like UBI and stuff do come into play, because whilst things are shut and like off, like having that money, you can kind of pump it back into the economy instead of everything having to shut down. And that's kind of like what will happen with AI. Like you're seeing it like with like shops and stuff shutting down because everything's moving to like an online platform, like the death of the shopping mall, for instance, in America. like everything's gone online, and in this pandemic they're all shutting down, they're shut, you don't go to them, doesn't really work. And like that will be kind of like what happens to the economy with AI. Like all of the lower end jobs will just go, as you're saying, and no one's going to notice until it is like the more professional jobs, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I think the pandemic is almost like AI took those jobs and will do what it's going to do over the next 10 years, has temporarily done it just overnight, sort of thing. Like all of those people doing sort of shop jobs and all these sorts of things have basically lost their jobs. And in that case, and I'm not massively certain, I don't really know what's happened with America, what their sort of system is like. But in the UK, we have the furlough scheme and all these sorts of things. We've basically had to do, maybe not enough, but we've had to do something.
Yeah.
Because the alternative is I think at one point it was a third of the workforce was on the furlough scheme. You're looking at 10 million people unemployed, and it just happened overnight. Well, I think it will be sort of like the frog not knowing it's in boiling water if you heat it up quietly, because exactly what has happened with that will happen over the next 10 years, just sort of stretched out as more of these professions are lost to artificial intelligence. In 10 years' time, people who are working and people who aren't working and sort of services and things could look exactly like they do now, but not because of a pandemic, just because those jobs are gone. And as I said, because it will happen sort of more slowly than just a pandemic happens overnight, I doubt, well, I hope, but I doubt we will see the levels of financial support that we have at the moment, because it just won't be sort of an urgent thing that happens quickly.
Yeah. It's interesting because like it's all like mindset, really, isn't it? Because you could have like 3 or 4 generations born into a system where that's all set up, and they're going to think that there's no other way to do it. And I often think sometimes like, oh my God, that sounds so scary, but actually like it doesn't. I'm just used to it being a certain way. And like, if I had always been that way, it'd be all right. I don't know. It's a weird one because it changes so much. So it's quite hard to get your head around. And I think that's probably why people don't really talk about it, because it's like the scale of it is so big that like it kind of never ends once you start talking about it. Like it just goes off in every direction, every sector of work, education, like the economy, farming, law. It's just crazy.
I think another thing about it is that so it's quite a, what's the word? I'll use the word centrist. It's quite a sort of centrist political issue, this sort of AI thing. It's not like concerned with the far left and sort of radical communism and stuff. It's not concerned with the far right and radical extremism and things. It's quite a centrist issue of people having jobs to do and what we allow our society to look like in that way. Maybe centrist isn't the right word, but you can sort of see what I mean. And I think it sort of gets lost on people a bit, because a lot of the news and a lot of the media is like heavily on one side or the other. And when you start to put these centrist sort of things, and Scandinavia is a very obvious example of it, with their sort of social systems and things. They are very good at getting people to sort of get behind stuff. Whereas I think in the UK and America, it's very much like, oh, this is like the radical things on either side of the picture. Whereas the thing we really want to be doing, which is something in the middle and would probably work, sort of gets lost and people don't really pay it attention. I think that's exactly what's happening with a lot of this stuff. And, universal basic income, you have one group of people saying, oh, it's terrible, it will completely destroy the economy and all these sorts of things. And then other people saying, oh, it's like, it's going to be, it's socialism. This is it. This is the sort of the left-wing lifestyle we've wanted. Whereas there's people in the middle saying, well, it's not really, it's a sensible tax policy that's working for a lot of successful normal countries. So yeah, I think it sort of gets lost in this sort of thing, and yeah, which is unfortunate, but what can we do about it?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's just like everything else that we do. I think this is the interesting thing with artificial intelligence, because it's not just science based. It's not just like moral based. It's not just ethically based. Like, it also has like an element of like political, like it has like a political landscape, and it also kind of has a bit of a, I don't know what the word is, but kind of like this reference to our ego too.
Yeah, it's so tied into like society and what it is to be human
Yeah.
that it becomes very sort of entangled, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. It becomes very entangled in just everyday life, and yeah, it's very difficult. In some ways it sort of almost blends in and we don't ever see it, but then in some cases it becomes very obvious and it grabs a lot of attention. But, yeah, I think so. Yeah, one thing I did want to discuss was I mentioned the movie Her to you.
Yes.
Like, you watched it.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I'd recommend it to sort of anyone to watch, and there might be a few spoilers in the next few minutes, but this is something that I wanted to talk about because I love it as a movie, and I think it's a really sort of interesting take on AI and how we interact with it. So
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. When I was watching it, I found it really interesting because the way that they like introduce her. So Her, by the way, everyone, she's voiced by Scarlett Johansson, isn't she? Yeah, and it's like this idea that this man like buys this. Did you say program, or is it an app? It's a program, isn't it?
It's a personal assistant.
Yeah, for your computer. It's kind of like the paperclip, but an AI. And like the way that they introduced her, and like the way that she asks questions, it might just be because it's a human voicing her, but like it is how you would ask questions. And that's what I found like most interesting about the whole film, was like it wasn't what he was asking her, it's the way that she would like answer with a question, because she was like as curious. And then it kind of just doesn't go dark, but it kind of just shows you that like, well, like what I don't really want to ruin the film, so I'm trying to like tiptoe around certain bits, but yeah, it was interesting to see like how he without spoiling it, how he like treated her, got connected to her, and then kind of goes full circle, doesn't it?
Yeah,
but what did you like about it?
Obviously the ending bit, which we won't give away, but like what happens in the end is like it's really well done, and I think it's really thought provoking in terms of like how we think we interact with AI and what AI actually is and what it's doing. I think another sort of really interesting thing is without being too much, it's all about how this guy sort of interacts and sort of his personality and how it plays off against the AI. What's really interesting is sort of how other people treat them and how they sort of view him and this AI like together. And
Yes,
I think that's really interesting. And again, I think that is, do you think something like this could happen in real life? Do you think we could all be making friends with AIs and stuff?
Totally. Like the amount of people, like just look at like when social media first started, like the amount of people getting catfished, and like and just talking to like random people that you don't know online. Do you know what I mean? And just like that whole like weird point of the internet where everyone's having like online relationships and all that kind of stuff. So totally, we humans hate being lonely, and if there was something that you could download that checked in on you and like understood you and could chat to you if it noticed if something was going on, but was emotionally intelligent enough that like you could kind of have a relationship with it. Like totally, that humans would totally be into that. But like I also found it really interesting how he gets like jealous when he realizes like this program's with all the other people as well. It's like not just him that this AI is like in a relationship with. But
Yeah,
I agree with you. The ending is good, so people need to watch it so we can.
Yeah, definitely go watch it, and maybe go onto our Discord channel and talk to us about it over there.
Yes, that would be great. And you can find links to our Discord channel in the description and our social media platforms. So definitely do that because we want to talk about it.
It's a seamless plug there.
Yeah, that was a good seamless plug. I like it. Should we move on to some news? I haven't really got that much left to say about it. It's such a confusing and it seems like tangled area, but I would guess that really transparency, accountability, and just kind of like open sourcing to the public would probably be the way to counter that.
Yeah, I think so too. I think a lot of it is sort of we as a society need to probably think more about this, and someone needs to write down some rules.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. Next week, episode 5, we're going to be looking at AI in the future, aren't we, and where we think it's headed. So we'll probably talk a lot about sort of where it might go and what we expect it to be doing. So yeah, tune back next week for some more on that.
Yeah.
A final of the series as well.
Yeah. No, I'm excited because we can kind of like bring all this together, and there'll probably be some more wilder outcomes and some probably quite boring outcomes. But no, I think it'll be good. It's always fun talking about the future. But let's move over to some news. So I'll go first with the first thing because it's probably, well, it will have happened when this episode comes out, but we are landing on Mars this week, and from what it looks like, they've managed to get it lined up perfectly with where they wanted it to touch down on the Martian surface.
Yep, so we're recording this on Wednesday. It's due to touchdown on Thursday, isn't it? So
Yes.
when this goes out, I think people will probably know more than we do at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, but it looks cool. I think it's landing in a crater called Jezero, which is just north of the planet's equator. And obviously it's doing its mission to try and find signs of past life and correct rock samples that will be returned to Earth in the 2030s, which I thought was quite a ways away.
I think. Well, I don't think they are launching them back. I think the idea is that we will go there and collect them.
Okay.
So we're waiting for people to, or at least another rover or another sort of craft to go there. That was my understanding. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I didn't think this mission was bringing them back. Like we are going to have to go and get them at some point.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. But as everybody knows, me and Matty really only care about this because of the drone helicopter that's going to be on Mars. I can't wait to see that. Obviously, it's cool if we find signs of like past life and all that kind of stuff, but I just want to see aerial footage of Mars.
Yeah, I think it's going to be awesome. Do you know, is there going to be live footage of the landing? I know there's this like the 7-minute dreaded window where it's like going through the atmosphere and it will lose all communications. But do you know, apart from that, if there's going to be relatively live video footage or anything? Or...
I'm not sure. I haven't really seen much on like social media. I think there's obviously like a lot of buzz around the event and there's a lot of interviews and stuff happening. I can imagine they'll have a stream, but it might not be like a visual stream where we get to see it on the surface or anything. They might just be like talking us through it and be like, oh, we've received confirmation that it's landed and stuff like that. Kind of probably like the one for the UAE.
Yeah.
They'll probably have an animation and stuff showing what stage it's in and stuff like that.
I'll be keeping an eye out. the watch anyway.
Yeah. They were actually posting on the socials today like what time zones it was for everybody, because apparently like some people were going to be at school and they were doing like school viewings and stuff like that, which is always pretty cool. The only thing that was ever special at my school, and this will tell you a lot about the generation that we grew up in, right? No cool science breakthrough or anything like that where we get brought into assembly to watch. The only thing I got brought into assembly to watch was to watch England versus Brazil in a World Cup.
I remember that.
We wanted to go and sit and watch it at like 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the only thing. Nothing cool like this. So
I think you're the year above me, probably
Yeah.
school-wise. Yeah, I remember it. I think it's my final year. We did the solar eclipse. That was a big thing.
Oh,
We were
that's
there
cool.
for that.
That's
Mate.
cool.
It had some scientists come in and bring some telescopes and stuff. So that was awesome. But
Decent.
yeah, we've been like during our childhoods, nothing particularly special has happened, does it?
Yeah, not like that
Being
anyway. Yeah, all the events kind of just seem to be like cultural events, not
Mhm.
like cool events. But
Mhm.
yes, that's pretty cool. And then the other bit of news that I've got, because it's kind of keeping it in with space, is the European Space Agency has launched a recruitment program. And yeah, you can apply to be an astronaut. From what I saw, you need a degree in STEM. You need a degree in English. Not a degree in English, sorry. You need a degree in STEM. You need qualifications in English and one other language. You obviously need to be good at maths. And they need you to either be qualified or you need to be learning how to be a test pilot.
Mhm.
So,
Rules us out then.
yeah. Because I saw it and I was like, yes, this is the opportunity, but not quite.
Mhm. But no, it's cool that they're hiring new astronauts, and hopefully, I presume these will be astronauts that in the future will be on sort of crewed missions, hopefully to Mars and stuff. So there might be some famous faces in the future along
Yeah.
this fun.
They're gonna be like all the people that got on the boats.
Mhm.
So respect to those future humans. But no, it looks kind of interesting. The application process looks fun. I just think it's cool that they're making it more open, because when I was a kid, it was like, what do you want to be when you're older? And like those kind of jobs crop up, don't they? Oh, I want to be an astronaut, or want to, I don't know what other ones pop up, maybe a racing car driver or something like that. But like for me, it was always an astronaut, but it wasn't something that was like, not that it was impossible, but you just knew like it was going to be difficult to get there. But like it's cool that the whole like space age is opening up a lot of more like careers for space. Like I think in one of our first episodes we mentioned this, like you can be like a janitor for Space Force or something, wasn't it? For like the 2030s or something, where you can go to space and stuff, but it is just to clean like the space station. And that's just so cool in itself that like the average person's going to be able to do that in the future. When like even now, like it's super specialist. So it's kind of cool.
It's cool. I also had two bits of news. So the first one was on Russia and China. So Russia didn't join the Artemis Accords. So NASA, I think it was 8 countries in total, sort of signed these Artemis Accords. That was sort of not a contract, but an idea of how we were going to get to the moon and do stuff on it, and sort of work together in a big happy family to do things.
Yeah.
Russia didn't sign that, but today they've announced that they are preparing to sign a memorandum of understanding with China to basically create their own lunar project. So they've not actually signed it yet; it's still to be signed, but it's all go. And there's like press conferences and things where Russia and China are developing their own joint lunar research station.
Nice.
So in terms of the timeline, China's already made some progress on this. They've already basically got a plan to build a lunar base at the South Pole on the moon, and already launches. So Chang'e 6, 7, and 8 missions are going to be sort of some of the initial work for that. I think still sort of science reconnaissance missions, but some of the initial stages towards that. They are planning to build a presence in the 2020s and 2030s, and then by 2036 to 2045, a long-term human presence at the lunar South Pole, and that will be a joint China and Russia mission to do that. So, I think it's interesting. Obviously, international cooperation is going to be key to doing this. I doubt even America could do it by themselves, build a sort of long-term lunar base.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's quite interesting that they've gone their own way and we're getting this sort of space race again. So
It'll be good for innovation,
mm-hmm.
but maybe not so good for politics.
Yeah, well, I think there's a very real chance that things could have dramatically soured by 2040 between Russia and China and the rest of the world. So it'll be interesting to see what the sort of wider political backdrop is for this. But but it's interesting that they've decided to sort of cozy up and do it together. See where it goes, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then the second bit of news for me was a bit of tech news. So this was Ford today announcing that by 2030, all vehicles in Europe, sold in Europe, will be electric by Ford. So they've already they've announced £1 billion worth of spending to convert their factory in Germany into an electric vehicle assembly plant, so producing just electric vehicles. And then over the next decade, they've got this timeline of first commercial vehicles going electric, and then eventually all vehicles going electric. So yeah, it is. I mean, it looks promising, I think. And I think what's interesting about this is that for a long time it was very much, it sort of seemed like, oh, the government were going to have to force people to use electric cars, and it's the same with a lot of technologies. Oh, the government will have to subsidize and force people to use solar and stuff. And now we are just at the point where like these technologies are becoming sort of viable enough. The cars have enough range and are just about cheap enough, sort of thing. And what was I going to say? I think you've got the second part of that sentence, as I was saying.
Just about like range and how it's probably more so like the company is forcing everybody's hands, not the
that's
government.
So rather than the government sort of mandating it, these companies are now saying, "Oh, we can make more money selling electric vehicles, so let's get on board with that." So I think that's promising. Ultimately, I've said all along, it will be money that wins out, and if these companies think they can make more money selling electric vehicles, they're going to do that. So.
No, I'd agree with you, and I think that sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
I like the 2030 date when we talk about anything to do with the climate crisis. What really makes me cringe and get stressed out and keeps me up at night is when people say 2050. 2050, because I feel like it's way too late by then. Yeah,
2030. Over the next decade, we're going to have to do a lot, and hopefully, it won't be a case of we're at 2029, everyone panic quick. we're going to have to do a lot this year to get things done. Hopefully, it's more of a we try to get there as quickly as possible, and by 2030, we're going to be done, kind of thing. 2030, I think is obviously it's not the ideal case. The ideal case is we'd already done it, but it's perhaps a sensible ideal solution that will make an actual difference. So I think that's really promising.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. For the advert that won't be named for any reasons, there was just one today that I saw, and they were saying they were going to try and go completely carbon neutral by like 2050, and I was like, why do you need that long? Like, there are already companies going carbon neutral, but hey, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that pretty much wraps up the news segment, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's all I had this week.
So, yeah, guys, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure you give it a thumbs up on YouTube. And if you're listening, go and give us a nice rating on Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts. And I don't know what you can do on Spotify, but if you can do something nice, because, it's always nice to be nice. If you want to drop us an email, you can drop us an email at theinfinitevoidpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to follow us on socials to keep up to date with everything that we're doing, with new episodes dropping, you can go and follow us at Infinite Void Pod. And then if you want to hit me or Matty up with a question or a suggestion, or you just want to talk to us about the film Her, I'm at Jacob E. Carson, and Matty is the Matty JMP. And we also have a Discord and Patreon now. There'll probably be an ad for the Patreon somewhere in this, and it'll also be in our description. And same for the Discord, so go and check both of those things out. I think the Discord's first 100 members are open, and then it goes to invite only. So get on that whilst you can, because that's always fun. And yeah, we will catch you in the Infinite Void next week for our 5th and final part of our AI series. What will AI look like or be like in the future? So catch you then. Hey everyone, we wanted to take a moment to tell you about our brand new Patreon page.
Yeah, so we've devised a load of new goodies that are neatly packaged across 3 different tiers for you.
Tiers start at £3 and go all the way up to £10 a month.
Just to say, the Patreon is in no way an obligation, and we're going to continue making the podcast as it is freely available across all the platforms. But if you'd like to support us and show your support, you can now.
So yeah, head over to patreon.com/Infinite Void Pod for more information.